Hello, everybody. Welcome to today's NITRO Studio workshop. We're going to be covering the power of custom actions and go through some of the more advanced features of what you can find in the custom action toolset. And so we'll be touching on a few different things. But I first want to welcome everyone who's joined. I see there's a number of folks who've been to these before, a few new folks on here as well. That's great to see. I will preface this workshop by saying it is going to be going over more advanced features. So there might be some basics that we're not going to cover in great detail, but certainly, feel free at any point in time if you have any questions at all. We have a questions box on the GoToWebinar screen. You should be able to see that in the drop down there. There's a question area to answer ask your questions. I'll go through if I see interesting questions that I want to pull into the discussion as we go along. I'll go ahead and do that if there's any, but we also have Scott on the line who will be able to answer any questions as we go along. So if I don't get to it, he will, and if there's time at the end, I'll go through some other questions we might not have addressed during the session. So who am I? Well, I think a lot of you know who I am, but I'm James Restivo. I'm with Crow Canyon Software. Just passed my 8-year anniversary here, so been here for a while. Helped usher in the development of NITRO Studio and have overseen some of the development on that. So something I know pretty well. The other applications we offer, there's a number of things. As a lot of you probably know, we have business applications. There's NITRO Studio, which we're kind of talking about in detail today. Custom solutions we can build to tailored for your needs. We also have AI bot services. That's a relatively new addition, and if we have time today, I'll talk a little bit about the bots. It's not really the intention or focus on today's workshop, but if we have a time at the end, I'll talk about the Teams integration piece within custom actions that will tie into a bot service. So I can touch on that. If I don't get to it today, I'll talk about it in our next workshop. So there is going to be another instance, another workshop we're going to be doing in December for custom actions part 2. So anything I don't cover today, any of those advanced, more advanced things I don't cover today, we'll be talking about in the next workshop. Just a quick overview of what NITRO Studio is all about. There's forms, workflows, reporting, portals. It's there for the modern UI for Office 365 and the classic UI for on-premises. And there's spaces for database integration. We're actually going to touch a little bit on the database integration piece today as well. And you can see it runs on all these different platforms. So I'm going to end the slideshow there because I want to kind of give you a framework of where we're coming from for today's workshop and kind of what we're going to be doing. So you should be able to see, and just make sure it's showing the right screen here. So why am I not seeing that? What's showing? That's interesting. Okay. Well, I assume it's showing the right screen where you see custom actions as part of a purchase request list. And someone can correct me if that's not what's showing. But I wanted to talk about this in the context of this, somewhat complex approval process we have for purchase requests. So purchase requests is one of our out-of-the-box products. It comes with all this configured in it, so you can see everything that's there. So you don't have to build any of this, but this could hopefully give you some insight or some ideas on how to build out more complex processes or business processes for your side. So we're going to be going over some of the tools that we're using in this workflow that give it the power. So what you're going to see in here, there is a little bit of scripting, with JavaScript, but not a lot. There's really not a lot, and all of it's exposed through the interface of NITRO. So you're not going into compiled code or C# or anything like that to get the process working. This is all done through configuration. If you have some knowledge of JavaScript, you can take it even further, but it's not always required, not necessarily required to get this to the function of what I'm going to show today. So a couple concepts I sort of want to lay the groundwork for now are these things called variables and this thing called advanced conditions. So and just showing you, we're coming at this from the purchase request solution here, and we're going to go through how to kind of how to build out this purchase request process. So I'm actually going to jump back over to the slides right now. Hang on, and talk about the variables. Let's see if I get this going. Slideshow. Okay, no, it's doing that thing again. Okay, I'm going to swap, and I'm going to move on to the next slide. Okay, so variables. So I'm going to show this slide, and I'll show you where it is in the custom action tool. The variable, if you're familiar with that, with coding concepts, or if you have familiarity with JavaScript, you should kind of understand what a variable, or kind of have some knowledge of what a variable should be. What the idea is behind it, it's a place to store information, and this could be all sorts of types of information. And then you can use that information later on in your process. So what we're talking about here are a way to store a text string. You could store a number. You can even store a null value. I'll kind of show you where we might be using that null value in a workflow or in a process. There's placeholders that you can put into the variable. So you can take items, you can dynamically populate that variable from a placeholder within the SharePoint item that you're working on. So you want to take some data. It's going to vary by who the requester is, or maybe vary by the department. You want to take some information and map it into that variable. We can then also use calculations using some of the functions we have. We have a sum function. We have there's a large number of functions we have, and these are outlined in our manual. And I think I'll touch on those in our next workshop in some detail, the different functions we have available. But there are a number of ones that you can use, and you can actually map those into that variable object and then use that later on in your process. So it kind of helps you to, in some ways you could use it to help solidify or consolidate what your workflow is, so maybe it's less confusing, or there's fewer moving parts. Just gives you some way to really kind of build that out. And then the other really important one here, I think, I probably shouldn't have put it at the bottom because I think it's a little more important than this, is the result of a web service call. And one of the things here, some of this other stuff you might be able to get away with without using a variable, but the result of a web service call, that's going to be mapped to a variable, and that's sort of a requirement and able to use that data you've captured from that web service call. You want to use that data in your process, and the way to do that is to map it into a variable. And I'll show you how to do that. And that's going to then allow you to reference that variable, and then you can use it later on. And just to give you a sense before I jump back into the site, there's different ways that you can use that variable once you have it. So we can use it in condition evaluation. So a very simple condition evaluation would be column X equals this value, and that could be what's coming from that variable. We can also map that data from the variable into a field on your form. So you can use this syntax here, reference your variable name, which we're going to assume we set a variable as var ccs1. And we use this hash to pull the value out of it. So it actually would do exactly the syntax to get whatever value you put into that var CCS and use it later on in your process. And then the next thing I'm going to talk about a little bit in some detail are these advanced conditions. And you can actually use those variables in your advanced conditions. And I'm also going to talk about these query lists and some of the things you can do with once you've built a query list action, some of the things that you can do with the data you've gotten from that query list action. So you can see you can use that in a condition as well. So I'm going to jump out of this right now and go into our examples here. So if we're going to, let me show you about the variable in using data from that query list. I think it's under this one. No, it's under this one here. Okay. Actually, let me cancel out of this real quick. And get rid of this thing. All right, there we go. All right, so one thing we're doing here is we're using a variable to, in the context of getting employee data. So this getting of employee data can happen either through a query list, which is what I have set up here in this example, or it could be done through a web service call. And both kind of act similarly. Like doing a query list and a web service call actually aren't all that different. You're basically going out saying, okay, I want to get information from somewhere. Query list just allows you to query the SharePoint database, SharePoint lists, whereas a web service call could go out and query an external database like a SQL database. So it's essentially doing the same thing in a lot of ways. I know there's more you can do with a web service call, but if you're getting data and using that later on, you're kind of doing the same thing. And what we've set up here is we have this query list where we're going out and capturing some information. We're going to get from this, you kind of walk through this, how this query list is set up a little bit. We're saying on the current item, which is the item we're running this action from, we want to go get information from the employee data list. So that's our database that we're pulling information from. What information are we pulling back? That's where this condition comes in play, where we're saying we're building out this query where the title of is equal to that requester email, and then which is the requester email is the value in the current item. So we're taking this placeholder of the current item, and this is another thing I wanted to point out today too, and a lot of you might already know this, but if you use the % symbols around the column placeholder, that gives you that dynamic capability to reference that column placeholder. And then you can see down here, we're actually mapping the information we're getting from that query list item into a variable. So real quick, I should have gone over this first, but just to touch on it, there's this variables button here. And you're actually going to see this in both custom actions and in NITRO workflows. We've just added this capability to NITRO workflows. We were doing it a different way in NITRO workflows, but we've now made it kind of consistent across the two programs to do the same thing. But all you need to do to define your variable is you click this button and you can just give it a name, and then you can give it the default value. So this default value is what I was talking about with the variable inputs on the slide. Essentially, it could be just a string of text, or it could be a number, or you could just leave it blank to capture the information. And as you go along and process through the workflow or the custom action process, you can change the value of that as you go along. So that gives you some dynamic capabilities to change that reference. But in this case, we left it blank to start. And same with EE department, we left it blank. And then, so within the context of the query list action, we're going out, we're getting the data, from this list, and then we're actually going to take that information from the query list that we've created here. We're going to take that information and map it into we're taking the supervisor information and mapping it into the EE super field. We're taking the department information and we're mapping it into the EE department. So these are two variables that we're defining. And then as far as an output, what we're doing is coming over here and taking that information and mapping it into a value. So if you want to take the supervisor field, you can map it into, it can take that information. So we've defined this variable as the supervisor from that employee data list. Take that employee data list, map it in here, and it's going to give you that supervisor from that employee data list. Same with department. You take the department from that employee data list, it's going to take that information and map it into the employee department field. So you can see that's how we use the variable to first capture the information that we want to use later on, and then map it into the fields that we need to put it into. So that's one use case there. Another way to use it is in, if you're using it in conditions, if you wanted to compare different values. And we're using this, I'm actually going to go over to our, a second, let me pull it up over on this side. I'll bring it onto the screen. We're going to, in our two-level approval process, we're actually using this variable just as an example of how you'd use a variable as a null concept. So let me just give me a second and pull this up over here. All right, get this. All right, get the article, and I'll get the section that talks about the action. Okay. Okay. Just another example of an approval process that we're talking about. Just pulling up our article about using custom actions and two-level approval processes. Just to, we kind of explain how to do this, but I don't think, what I'm trying to convey today is why. Like, why are we using this variable? Why are we doing it the way we're doing it? And so what we're kind of telling you to do in this article is we're going to define this variable of approver empty. Well, why are we going to do that? Well, we're doing that because actually what we want to do is compare this value to something else, and there's no other way to really get a null value to compare it to something else, right? So you have to define the variable and say, okay, now this is null, and what we're going to do is take, further down in the process, you can see we're using this what we call our advanced condition. Let's see where it is. It's down a little further, I think. Advanced condition, yeah. So you were using this kind of parse field value. I'll talk about what the advanced condition is doing in a little more detail in just a little bit. But essentially, I want to point out we're using this approver empty variable. We're getting the value of it, so we're using the variable hash value, and we're comparing it to something else, which is we're doing a query list against an approver definition list, and we're pulling the field from that approver definition list, which is called L2 approver. And we're basically just checking to see, is there a value there? Do we have a value in that field or not? Because this is null, it's going to say, okay, well, it's going to evaluate as true if this is also null. Or actually, it could evaluate it as false, depending on what operator you put in there. So this is the first part of the conditions. This is the second part, and it's using this not equals as the replacement for those commas there, essentially. And it's saying, okay, if this value does not, if this null value does not equal this value over here, then continue execution. So that's another way to kind of give you a way to branch out your workflows. So you could do, this action has this advanced condition in it, this other action has this advanced condition in it. And that's basically what we're doing with a lot of our approval workflows, both this kind of two-level one we have outlined here, and also the purchasing one that I'll show you a little bit later in this webinar. But just to kind of like go through the anatomy of what this advanced condition is doing in a little more detail, I'm going to pop open our PowerPoint. Let me get back to that. Let's see. All right, I gotta swap that out. All right, so the advanced condition. So, we're using this purchasing workflow. It's certainly, I think it's a really powerful, really valuable thing we have in our custom action tool to do some comparisons that you can't normally do with just the standard out of the box, compare category equals hardware request or requester equals X. You can, get more information. And so I kind of wanted to give you a little more of the anatomy. I know it's not the prettiest diagram here. I apologize, but it's hopefully it gets the point across. Where what we're saying is we're going to define our condition as an advanced condition, and then we're going to use some operator. And then that operator, as you can see, becomes the two commas. So those commas are sort of the placeholder for that operator. And then we put our arguments on each side of that comma separation. So you can see argument one over here on the left-hand side is that we're going to be, querying. There's some query list action we've predefined here in this example. We're going to take this query list. We're going to look at linked items, and we're doing this because what we're querying is a group of related tasks or related items to a parent item. So we're querying that list of items. We're doing a sum on some value. So in this case, we're doing total cost, and you'll see this in our purchasing workflow. There's a total cost field, and we're taking that information, we're summing it up. So we're using that function option in query lists, and we're comparing that value to some other value, which is 8,000. So in this case, what we're doing is we're going to either do something or not do something based on this condition being met. So if in this case, it's like a purchase request, is over a certain value, we're going to do something. The action's going to do something. I'll show you that. But as far as what you can put as the argument on either side of these, oops, sorry about that. On either side of these question marks, I'm sorry, not question marks, commas. It is a comma. It's not like quotation. It is a comma. The argument can be anything. So you can have a variable, like we were just talking about. You can do a variable value. You can do a query list value. So you're just taking what's the value of what you've queried. You can use the placeholder. So if you want to use like that query list from employee data, if you want to say query list hash supervisor is equal to something else, then you could maybe subvert the process or branch out to a different process depending on what business process you have in place. There's a query list function, which is kind of what we're showing down here. I think just put a literal string, which is essentially what we're doing over here. And you can see both sides of the coin can be, all those options are available. Every single one of those options is available on both sides. So it really gives you a great way to compare the two things that you want to compare. And then later on, you can, you compare those conditions. You're saying, okay, this one's not equal to the other one. Now we want to continue the process, or now we want to do something. Which in this case, we're saying if there is a value in level 2 approver, right? So this is null. This is not null. It evaluates as true. And what we're doing is setting that approval level to level 2 based on that. So kind of see that example there. And then we're going to touch on, touch on all this stuff as we go through the purchasing workflow, and you can kind of see how we've used all this information that, we've used the variables, we've used these query lists, we're doing all this stuff in a process that is a fairly detailed process that is, like I said, something you can build with the NITRO tool set itself, minimal scripting involved, and I'll walk through all that stuff. So when you're creating a purchase request or anything else, maybe something else that has to be submitted for approval, you want to go through an approval process. So there are a few things we need to set up ahead of time. There's usually an approver definition list, and you'll see kind of what we're referencing in this approval workflow, so you can see what needs to be created. But we're creating the submit for approval workflow, and you can see there's a bunch of things we're doing here. We're doing a query list action, we're executing scripts, we're updating a list item, and then we're actually going out and invoking a workflow. And I'm going to show you these workflows as well, since a lot of what we're doing in custom actions can be applied to workflows and vice versa. So just kind of walk through what this is actually doing. So first we got to go and do a query list. So when you're on a purchase request, you have do a new purchase request here. Actually, I'm gonna pull up one of these ones over here. Pending submission. And let me open up this one. So we're opening up a new office in Cincinnati. Not really, but assume we are. And we got to purchase some things. We got to purchase some laptops or hardware of some sort, and we want to get 10 items. So what we want to do is take some action on this list here, which is a sub list, child list to the parent purchase request. So we have the purchase request. We have our purchase request details as a child list or child items to that main list. So to get that collection, usually a lot of times there can be more than one item here. We can go and add another item, even just to kind of show you. We want to purchase, see if we have anything else. I don't know if we have anything else pre-populated here. I don't think we do. But let's just leave it blank. We can do, 200 price per unit for services. It's someone coming in doing something. It's like 40 hours. Save that. And then you can see there's 2 line items here, and we want to get each one of these line items. We want to be able to work to operate on all these line items at one time. And the way we're doing that is we're using this query list where we're going and checking those linked items. So we go and query the purchase items. We're using this lookup ID function here. So you can actually use this lookup ID to get the ID. This is basically pointing to the ID field of the current item and then comparing it to the ID field related purchase request in those linked items. So those purchase request details. And then we're, it's already, we're just getting that list of information. And then we are, this is actually one I added. This isn't part of the normal process. I'm just going to touch on it real quick because I was trying to show something. It didn't quite work for some reason, but I'll go through that in just a minute. So for now, let's skip that one. And then what we're doing is we're processing the purchase request. And this is where some scripting comes into play. And really all this is doing is defining it's a custom ID field. So this is another way you can kind of use the variables. Let me back up for just 1 second here. We defined a variable here for a purchase request ID. I know it's a little bit of a typo. We're going to get that fixed, but there's a purchase request ID variable, which is blank. So we want to fill that with something. So we're going to fill that information. We're going to fill that variable. In this case, we're actually using a script to do it. And the important thing I want to point out is that you can use this script tag here, CCS set workflow variable value, and then you define what that variable is that you've defined in the process, and then you fill it with something. So this PRID, as you can see, is being filled with some variables from further up in the process that are taking information from the item that we're working on. It's going to put some information in there, like some leading zeros, adding some things. So some stuff we're doing in the JavaScript to kind of format that purchase request ID. But then once we format it and get it all put together, we're going to add it to the purchase request variable that we created, this purchase request ID variable. And this is how we're doing it. Okay, so say that's the value. That's a variable, we're putting it in. And then, so now we've defined that variable, and that's really all this is doing is setting that variable for the purchase request ID. And then we go to our update list item. You can see that we're taking the information that we've gathered. Total cost, we're getting a sum of the total cost of all those items. So we're querying the list and getting a summation of the values. We're getting the purchase quantity, which is a summation of the quantity field in that linked items list. And then we're taking that variable, you can see the purchase request ID variable and value, and mapping that, again, we're mapping it into the purchase request number, which is obviously a field on that purchase request list. And then we're going out and invoking a workflow. So we do all that, and then we go invoke a workflow, which is going to just approval process for normal flow. So that has a whole host of, not to get too complicated here, but it is a whole host of things that workflow is doing. So we go into the approval process for normal flow. That's the workflow we're invoking. And see, we're using this user triggered function, user triggered option. So this user triggered option in workflows is how this one becomes available for use in that invoke workflow action. So if you don't have it marked as user triggered, it's not going to show as a possible workflow to be invoked. So if you want to invoke a workflow, whatever that workflow might be from your custom action, you're going to want to make sure you mark it as user triggered. And if you have different types of workflows in your system, actually, I think we were just talking about this with a customer earlier today. You could actually copy a workflow. Let's say you have a workflow that you want to do based on when an item is created or modified, one of these other options. But you also want to invoke that workflow from a custom action that you're running. Well, with the settings we have in workflows, which is pretty cool, you can actually take the workflow settings, export them out, import them back in, create a new workflow, and change the flag over here to say user triggered instead of on these options. So in that way, you can actually run the workflow in both ways, either through being invoked or through one of these other options. And then this is where we're defining what the approval levels are and the approval process. So we're going out, we're checking the approval, we're checking the current level approval tasks. We're going to see, okay, is this, we're getting the related purchase request ID, where it matches the approval level, or is the approval decision empty or not? What's the level number? And then you can see down here in the query list and in the Invoke Web Service actions, you have this add variable mapping option. So if we had any variables, we could add them in, but we're not doing that here. And then we're getting our approval level. So this is another query list where we're going out and checking that approval levels list. So that's another list we have out there in the system. And it's basically saying, okay, we're going to match up the approval level with the department, which is the department field on the purchase request list. We're going to match up that with the type of purchase request, type of purchase. We're looking at total cost and we're looking at level. So all this stuff is actually in our approval levels list. And if we go over to here, I'll show you. It looks like we don't have any configured at the moment, but all those things we're referencing are in here. So it gives you a way to compare what's in that purchase request to what's in this approval level list. So you can define all this stuff. What level is it at? What's the approval level name? Department, I think, is in here somewhere. Department you can select right here at the top. The type of purchase. So all that stuff can be matched and mapped up to the workflow process, right? So we have this approval levels list where we're defining the different approval levels. Then we're coming into our workflows and basically saying, okay, which one of these approval levels matches, and then we can matches where we are, and then we can continue the process. So we're getting that information. Then we're going to use that information. So we're doing, we queried a couple things, we've captured some data. Now, without a variable, that's fine because this information is actually stored in this name here. I don't mess that up. In this name right here. So that's where we can use that query list name. All right, so then we're doing this is where the advanced conditions are coming into play. So we're updating our purchase request. So now we're taking the information we've learned from querying different items, and we're going to decide whether or not we need to mark this as approved, not approved, move it on in the process. What are we doing with that purchase request? So we're taking our advanced condition where we've queried our approval level. We're actually using a different, you can see there's a different function here where we're counting. So what we're doing is we're counting the number of items that are in that approval level. And so when we do that query, we're checking, okay, are there any approval levels required for this particular item? That's basically what we're asking here. What approval levels are required? How many are required for this item? And if the answer is 0, all we're going to do is mark it as approval not required. And we're going to set the work log with the string concatenation function. We're just going to say there's no matching approvals. So we're first checking, are there any approval levels? We're taking account of those approval levels, and if that number equals, again, that equals is here in those commas. If it equals 0, then we're going to do this. Otherwise, we're going to ignore this action and move on to the next one in the list. So we're defining another variable here. This one's a little more complex, where we're getting the approver. So basically, we're taking the all the approvers that are in that approval level, and so you can see we're get approval level. So again, we're referencing that approval levels list, which is over here. And of all the items that match the conditions, what we're doing is we're getting all the request approvers. So that's a field here. What's approvers, request approvers. Oh, here it is over on the side. You got that request approvers. So we're taking whatever information is here, and we're actually mapping that into our variable, this workflow variable, get approver from request. So now we can use that. So we're getting that information, we're putting it into our variable. Now we're going to use that variable or check that variable. So then we have to check, are there any more levels in the process? So we're checking to see, a few things here, like are there any more approval levels? Are there approval levels at all? We're checking to see, is there, again, we're checking the approval levels. We're seeing if the approver is blank. If the approver is blank, this @ symbol is actually an escape character. So if you, it's just going to be blank value. You could also, going back to our example of the 2-level approval process I was talking about earlier, you could use that null value as a variable, and you can use that variable in here to compare the values. But in this case, we're just using this escape character of at, and then after it, there's nothing. So it knows that it's a blank value that we're comparing here. So we're doing that on we're checking our approval levels, and then we're checking our variable. Are there any approvers? And then so what are we doing? We're setting it as approved, right? Okay, so just kind of walk through it again. The purchase request status is going to be pending approval, and then we're going to check. This is an OR condition. So is this matched? Meaning, are there any more approval levels? If the answer is 0, then we're going to mark as approved. Or if we've gone through, it's at 0, there's no approvers, and the request, we've basically burned up all the approvers, we're going to go ahead and mark this item as approved. And then we have another variable here where we're getting a user collection. And so we're getting, again, we're checking to see, are there, before we even run the action, we're going to check, are there approvers there? Yes or no? If there are, let's go ahead and get this user collection. So we're going to use this user collection function. We're going to, it's going to be both the approvals, from the query list. We're going to get that approval level from the query list. And then we're going to get that information from the workflow variable that we defined earlier. We're actually going to kind of take all that information and put it into one other variable here, this workflow variable, all approvers. And then again, we're doing some checks here. So this is where we're doing a lot of these checks with advanced conditions, checking to see, are the approval levels valid? Are they there? Again, checking some blank values. If they're blank, then so now we're getting some more information here. So we want to, we're getting the information from the query list, and we're combining it all into this function. So the string concatenation, we're taking the title of the request, the purchase request that was submitted. We're taking, adding a space, a dash, and then we're getting the approval level name from that query list approval levels. Whoops. Oh shoot. Okay, yeah, that's good. The assigned to is the collection value. So this at collection value is, where's this coming from? All right, I'll get into this one in the next webinar, because I didn't actually get this information from my team on the at collection value. And then, this one's just a simple column mapping. We're calculating business time. So you can see there's a function here. We're getting the business time based on today. We're adding the due number of days, which again is coming from that approval level. So if we go back over to approval level, there's a due hours section over here. And then let's see, we're going back over here. So we're adding that calc business time. And then we're getting the next level of approval, which is coming from that get approval level field. So you can see there's quite a lot going on here. I mean, it's pretty complex stuff. But again, it's all doable through the NITRO interface. It's all doable through without, anyway, I want to say it's without coding, but there is some knowledge needed, of course, of what the syntax is and what we're trying to do here. And that's kind of what I'm conveying on today's call and today's workshop is, what does the syntax mean? Like, how are we using it? What's it doing? And you can see, kind of doing the same stuff here. It's kind of checking, doing some checks, and then we're populating some values. So, hopefully I'm getting the point across that, these things are applicable to complex processes. These complex processes can be done through NITRO actions and workflows. In this case, we're doing a combination of a workflow. We're doing this list of custom actions. Then we're going out and invoking this workflow. And then, if something happens where it gets sent back, there's another whole flow here, which I'll get into, private processor send back flow. So real simply, when we want to invoke an action, we're just going out and saying, current item, what workflow do we want to invoke? It could be a SharePoint workflow, Croquet workflow, or a Microsoft flow. But yeah, I mean, it's quite a lot you can do with it, and you can see how this process specifically is leaning very heavily on querying lists, getting data from those lists, using variables to store that data, using that information in conditions to check to see if we should continue to run the process. So there's quite a lot we're actually doing with those things here that make it, a robust solution, a robust way to build out these processes. And again, as you can see, other than some light scripting we're talking about up here, there's really nothing to do with JavaScript. It's all through that query list, referencing those variables, referencing those values, and then continuing on the process. So hopefully it gives you some sense of what's possible with custom actions, and it gives you some sense of different things that you can try to do with it. So I kind of want to pause for a minute here and just see if anyone has any use cases or any ideas or questions on how this might be used, or a business process you have in mind where you think could we possibly use this. If you want to pop it into the questions box, we can go ahead and get that answered or get that looked at. So kind of open up to that at this point if anyone has anything that they want to talk
I
about
don't see
there.
anything in the questions because I think there's a lot of take some time to absorb all the possibilities that are there and how incredibly useful and powerful this is in terms of what it can do, right?
Exactly. Yeah, I know it's kind of fire hose information. I hope it didn't glaze anyone's eyes over. We're going through all this stuff, but I just really want to show that it's possible to build out this complex process with these tools that are already there. If you have Nitro, you have these tools, you have the ability to build out these things. Again, you don't need to go into C# code or hard coded things. It can be all done through the actions, the variables, the query lists. It's all really powerful stuff.
That's right. And I think when you have a process in mind, then it starts to all make sense and you put the pieces together. I think the main message is that there's a wide range of possibilities here. The custom action seems like a little tool in some sense, but when you start to really dig into it, you've got amazing amount of capabilities with the querying of other lists and pulling in and then doing the calculations on it or comparisons. It's just really up to your imagination, or well, not really imagination. It's up to the requirements of the workflow that you can put into place. And of course, custom actions do very simple workflows too, so it's not like always this complicated, right?
Yeah, exactly. This is sort of like the the more complicated way to do it. And that was sort of the idea. Is I want to hopefully folks on this call, you've had some familiarity with what we're doing with custom actions and have an idea of when I say column mappings, you kind of know what I'm talking about. But that was the idea. I was going to take it a little further here, and we're going to do this again in the next workshop in December, where we're going to dig into some things like invoking web services and talk about how that works a little bit. Then we're going to talk about, you see as we're going through some of this stuff, and especially in the workflows, you're seeing all these functions that we're doing. So I want to give you some more insight or more details on that. Like string concatenation is probably fairly straightforward, I would imagine, but there's a lot of functions, and anyone who's looked into our column mappings setup can see there's a lot of different functions here. There's a lot of different things we can do and get. And we do have documentation of this on our website, or on our manual, but usually a lot of times it's a lot more engaging, or can stick a lot better if we have we talk about it on a workshop like this. And so that's one of the things we're going to go into probably in more detail in our next custom action workshop, is just give you more sense of when or where, how you can use these functions. I mean, there's, like I said, like I've said a couple times, there's the what you need to do, and then there's how you need to do it. Both of those things we can show you through the manuals and through the documentation. But what we're hoping to convey through these workshops is the why. Like, why do you use query lists? And I hope we can show that. Why do you use variables? Why do you why and when do you do these things? So hopefully I got some of that across in today's workshop. So yeah, I mean, if you want to reach out in the interim to address any of these any questions you might have, or if you start poking around with the custom actions, to start poking around with the query lists and some of these things, you guys have questions, let us know. We can certainly help you, kind of direct you to where you need to go, or give you some answers or some ideas on what you can do with it. You know, and so, it's sort of at the end here, a couple things I want to point out that we have available. And if you hadn't noticed already, we have some handouts. And Scott, I don't know if those should be available for them to click on now, right? They should be able to download those from the GoToWebinar interface. So I've never given out handouts before, so I don't really know how that works. Oh, maybe he stepped away.
No,
anyway, hopefully
you can click them and download them. I was on mute, sorry.
Okay.
You click and download them quite easily. Yeah, they're right there. Plus, also get in touch, and we'll talk about. A lot of our customers are talking to us every day about various things they're doing. So, we're always glad to have those kind of conversations.
Yeah. Oh, one other thing that well, I kind of touched on some of this stuff today. I meant to do this poll earlier in the the workshop, but for anyone who wants to do it, there's this poll of what areas of custom actions are you most interested in, and of course, if it's not on this list, I only was given 5 options to put in here. So if what you want to learn about is not on here, we can just go ahead and enter it into the questions box, and we can get it. But just I'm going to go ahead and launch this poll, and I'll kind of go through my closing remarks while that poll is open, and then we'll see what people have answered. So I'm going to go ahead and hit launch now for that. And so you go ahead and answer that when you can. In the meantime, let me show you. Let's get this slideshow going again. I have to switch this for some reason. And then, yeah, so the power of custom actions, part 2. This is what we're going to be talking about in our next call. We're going to take some information, maybe some data from this poll that we're collecting, and maybe revisit some of the stuff if it was a little we didn't quite get it, or want to learn more about it. That's fine. We can talk about that stuff in our next call. But this is going to be on December 2nd, same bat time, same bat channel, 11 a.m. So we'll be there to talk about this stuff. As always, you know how to reach us. There's well, we have sales on here, but you can also reach out to our support team at crocan.com, and SharePoint support at crocan.com. You can always give us a call. It's actually going to be option 2 for support if you need that, or option 1 will work too. Someone will get in touch with you. And then that's about it. So I'm going to go ahead and close out the poll. Thank you for responding. I appreciate all the answers. And so it gives me some idea. It looks like advanced conditions. It was on there. So I don't know if anyone did anyone have any questions on advanced conditions? If you do, please enter it into the questions box. And if you do, or send us an email, we can talk about advanced conditions in more detail. It's a fairly simple concept, to be honest with you, but it does take a little understanding of how it's set up to get it to work. But we can dig into more detail in our next session if people want to know more about it. And then good. All right. So I think that's good. I think everyone you have a great day. Thank you for joining me on this webinar, and we'll see you at the next one.